Dear learner, on the platform of MOOCs, I am Professor Nafis Ahmed Ansari from Department of Political Science of Aligarh Muslim University. In the series of the Personal Administration lecture, today we are going to take a very important topic that is related to the Public Service Commission. When we go through the history, that we find that most of the country were not having a system that we find today in the recruitment process. But in the passing of the time, the requirement that is there in the process of the functioning and the development and integrity commitment to the services and functioning of the organization or the state or the country has forced them to have a proper establishment of the institution. When we talk about the India in the chapter 2 part 14 of the constitution under article 315, chapter 2nd of the constitution of India says that number 1, subject to the requirements of this article, there shall be a public service commission for the union and a public service commission for each state. This provision is subject to the condition that the provisions of this article are met. Second, it says the parliament may, by law, provide for the appointment of a joint public service commission if two or more states agree that there should be one public service commission for that group of states, and if there is a resolution to that effect is passed by the House of Representative, or in the case of there being two houses, by each houses of the legislature of each those states. Third, the Public Service Commission of the Union may, with the consent of the President, agree to fulfill all the needs of a state if the governor of that state makes a request for the commission to do so. Being a member, there is a provision in the Indian Constitution, Article 316, that allows for the appointment of the chairman and the members of the Union Public Service Commission. When it comes to the Union Public Service Commission or a joint commission, they are appointed by the President of India. On the other hand, when it comes to the State Public Service Commission, they are appointed by the governor of the particular state. In addition, it has been stipulated to the greatest extent possible that at least 50% of the member of each and every public service commission shall be individuals who have served in their current position for a period of 10 years or more, either under the government of India or their respective state governments. A member of a public service commission is required to serve for a period of 6 years, beginning in the day that or he or she assumes office, or until the member reaches the age of 62 years, whichever comes first. In the case of Union Public Service Commission, the member must reach the age of 65 years, while in the case of State Public Service Commission or a joint commission, the member must reach the age of 60 years. An individual who previously served as a member of Public Service Commission is ineligible for reappointment to that position for the duration of the term they have served in that capacity. It is mandatory that the chairman of the Union Public Service Commission, UPSC, that we generally call, is not eligible for any further appointment with the government of India or any of the state governments. Nevertheless, once they have stepped down from their position, the chairman of the Public Service Commission would be available for the appointment to the Union Public Service Commission, either as a chairman or any other member of the commission, but they should not be eligible for any other employment. In a similar vein, a member who is not the chairman of the Union Public Service Commission is eligible for appointment as a chairman of the Union Public Service Commission or the chairman of a state public service commission, but they are not eligible for any other post. The Consolidated Fund of India is responsible for paying the expenses that the Union Public Service Commission incurs concerning the wages, allowances, and the pensions that they are owed to the chairman, members, and his staff. Absence of after the Supreme Court has conducted an investigation and confirmed the individual's guilt in accordance with the method outlined in Article 145, the President has the authority to remove the chairman or any other member of Public Service Commission from their position on the basis of proven misconduct. In the case of United States Public Service Commission or the Joint Commission, the President or the Governor in the State Public Service Commission has the authority to suspend from office of the chairman or any other members of the commission when a reference has been made to the Supreme Court. This suspension will remain in effect until the President has issued the appropriate orders based on the report of the Supreme Court. Number one, if the member is adjudged to be insolvent. Number two, if the member is engaged in any paid employment outside the duties of the office. Or number three, if the member is unfit to continue in office due to infirmity of mind or body, the President has an authority to remove the chairman or any other member of a Public Service Commission by an order. Historically, the directors of East India Company would be the ones who suggested potential candidates for the position of civil servants. These considered would then undergo training at the Helbury College in London before returning to India. Lord Macaulay's report of the Select Committee of the British Parliament provide the impetus for the introduction of the idea of modern civil services in India that is based on the merit in the year 1854. According to the recommendation made in the report, the patronage-based system that the East India Company uses should be replaced with the permanent civil service that is based on a merit-based system and that requires applicants to pass competitive examinations. With this objective in mind, the Civil Services Commission has established in London in the year 1854 and the first competitive examinations were held in the year 1855. At first, the tests for the Indian civil services were reserved exclusively for London. Age ranged from 18 to 23 years old, with the lowest age being 18 years old. The curriculum was created in such a way that the European classic receives a disproportionate high percentage of the total grades. As a result of all of this, it was challenging for Indian aspirants. Nevertheless, in the year 1864, Sri Satyendranath Tagore, the brother of Sri Rabindranath Tagore, became the first Indian to achieve financial success. 30 years later, 4 additional Indians were successful. The British government did not want a large number of Indians to be successful and enter in the Indian civil services. Thus, Indians petitioned for the simultaneous examinations to be held in India during the course of subsequent 50 years. However, their efforts were unsuccessful. Not until after the First World War and the Montesquieu-Chelford reforms did this become a consensus among the people. Since 1922, the Indian Civil Service Examination was being held in India initially in Allahabad and thereafter in Delhi following the establishment of the Federal Public Service Commission. This examination was initially held in Allahabad only. With the continuation of the examination in London, the Civil Services Commission continued to be the charge of administration. In a similar manner, leading police officers were members of Indian Imperial Police prior to the country's independence. These officers were selected by the Secretary of State in a competitive examinations. During the first open competitions for the service, which took place in England in June of 1893, 10 of the most qualified candidates were named probationary assistant superintendents of police. After the year 1920, Indians were once again given the opportunity to join the imperial police, and the following year tests for the service were held in both England and India. Notwithstanding the pronouncements of the suggestions made by Iceland Lantern Commission and the Lee Commissions, the process of Indianization of the police department continued to proceed at a glacial pace. Indians were appointed to 20% of the total number of the superintendents of the police positions until the year 1931 alone. The Indian police, on the other hand, began to hire more Indians beginning in 1939. This was due to the fact that there was no appropriate European candidates available at the time. In terms of the forest service, the British Indian government established the Imperial Forest Department in the year 1864. In 1867, the Imperial Forest Service was established in order to organize the activities of Imperial Forest Departments. Training for the officers appointed to the Imperial Forest Service took place in France and Germany between the year 1867 and 1885. Their training took place in Cooper's Hill in London until the year 1905. In 1920, it was agreed that additional recruitment to the Imperial Forest Service would be made by direct recruitment in England and India, as well as through promotions from the provisional services in India. This decision was made. All India Services Act 1951 was the legislation that led to the establishment of the Indian Forest Service in 1966, following the country's attainment of independence. From the perspective of the central civil services, the civil services in British India were divided into two categories: covenanted and uncovenanted services. These categories were determined by the nature of work, pay ranges, and the authority that appointed employee. In the year 1887, the Ashton Commission made a recommendation for the reorganization of the service according to new pattern. They also split the services into three groups: imperial, provincial, and subordinate. The Secretary of State was the individual who was responsible for the recruitment and leadership of the imperial services. In the beginning, the majority of candidates for these services were of British origin. Those who were responsible for the appointment and management of provincial services were the individual province governments. These governments, with the agreement of the Government of India, were the ones who formulated the rules that regulate these activities. The Indian Act of 1919 resulted in the division of imperial services into distinct groups: the All India Services, the Central Services. The Secretary of State for India was in the charge of the management of the two groups concerning subjects that were directly under the control of central government. The central service were concerned with those matters, with the exceptions of the central secretariat, the railway services, the Indian posts and the telegraph service, and the imperial customs service were the most significant of these services. Previously, the Secretary of State was responsible for making appointments to some of these, but in the vast majority of instances, the Government of India was the one who appointed and managed the members of these organizations. The Public Service Commission in India may trace its roots back to the first dispatch of the Government of India on the Indian Constitution reforms, which was issued on March 5, 1919. In this dispatch, the government expressed the necessity of establishing a permanent body that would be responsible for the regulations of the service problems. This idea of a body that was supposed to be largely responsible for the regulation of service problems was given a somewhat more practical form in the Government of India Act, which was passed in 1919. In accordance with these provisions of Section 1996C of the Act, a Public Service Commission was to be established in India. This commission was to discharge in regard to recruitment and control of public services in India such functions as may be assigned thereto by the rules made by Secretary of State in Council. Following the passage of the Government of India Act 1919, regardless of extensive correspondence that took place between different levels regarding the functions and the apparatus of the body that was to be established, no decision was made regarding the establishment of the body. After that, the matter was brought to the attention of the Royal Commission on the Superior Civil Services in India, which is also referred to as the Lee Commission. In its report that was published in the year 1924, Lee Commission suggested that the Statutory Public Service Commission that was envisaged by the Government of India Act 1919 should be constituted without any further delay, following the provisions of Section 96C of the Government of India Act 1919 and the strong recommendations made by the Lee Commission in 1924 for the early establishment of a Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission was established in India for the first time on October 1, 1926. This was the first time that the commission had been established in India. On the top of the chairman, there were 4 members who made up this group. First chairman of the commission was Sir Ross Barker, who served in the Home Civil Services of United Kingdom. Barker was a member of the commission. The powers of the Public Service Commission were not outlined in the Government of India Act 1919. Rather, they were governed by Public Service Commission powers rules of 1926, which was formulated in accordance with the provisions of subsection 2 of a Section 96C of the Government of India Act 1919. In addition to the Government of India Act of 1935, envisioned the establishment of a Public Service Commission for the Federation as well as Provisional Public Service Commission for each provision or set of provinces. Therefore, the accordance with the requirement of the Government of India Act 1935 and with the Act's implementation takes place in April 1st, 1937, Public Service Commission was renamed from the Federal Public Service Commission. Subsequently to the inauguration of the Constitution of India on January 26, 1950, the Federal Public Service Commission was renamed the Union Public Service Commission. Furthermore, the chairman and members of the Federal Public Service Commission were elevated to the position of chairman and members of the Union Public Service Commission by virtue of Clause 1 of Article 378 of the Constitution. In accordance with the Article 312 of the Constitution of India, the Parliament possesses the authority to establish one or more services that are common to both Union and the states, the All India Judicial Service as well as other services. The Union Public Service Commission UPSC is the organization that organizes the recruitment process for all these services. The State Public Service Commission SPSC is the organization that is responsible for the recruiting process of administrative services administered at the state level. In India, the Union Public Service Commission serves as the federal institution responsible for human resource recruitment. The Constitutional Affairs Committee is an autonomous committee. Part 14 of the Indian Constitution, namely Article 315 to 323, contains the provisions that pertain to the compositions of the Union Public Service Commission, the appointment and the removal of its member, as well as the duties and functions of the Union Public Service Commission. The State Public Service Commission in the state operates in the parallel with the Union Public Service Commission at the central level. Article 315 to 323 of Part 14 of the Constitution contains the provisions that pertain to the composition of Special Powers Commission, the appointment and removal of its member, as well as the powers and functions of State Public Service Commission. So, what exactly are the provisions of the Constitution? One of the provisions of the Article 315 is the Constitution of Public Service Commission for both Union and the State of India. One of the provisions of Article 316 is the appointment and term of office of members of Union Public Service Commission and the State Public Service Commission. Article 317 pertains to the removal and suspension of a member who is either a member of Union Public Service Commission or State Public Service Commission. Article 318 grants the Commission the authority to establish regulation that governs the terms and conditions of employment for its members and personnel. Section 319 of the Constitution provides members of the Commission from continuing to occupy the office after they have ceased to be the member of the Commission. Article 320 outlines the obligations and responsibilities of the Public Service Commissions. Article 321, which states the Public Service Commission have the authority to expand their powers. Article 322 pertains to the expansion incurred by the Public Service Commission. Article 323 is a document that contains reports from the Public Service Commission. In the conclusion, we can say that the framers of the Constitution envisioned the Union Public Service Commission as equal partner with the Supreme Court and the Comptroller Auditor General CAG in the process of safeguarding the democratic ideals that are inherited in the Constitution of the country. The CAG, the Election Commission and the Supreme Court are the other three pillars that contribute to the structure. It would come as a surprise that constitutional institutions such as the Public Service Commission are established and significant in a country like India. Therefore, while recruiting for positions in public service sectors, it is essential to take into accounts the presence of varied regions, religious, minorities, and economically and educationally disadvantaged groups. This is especially true in situations where political and ethnic biases as well as concerns over the caste play a disproportionate role. In this kind of situation, the harm to the democratic fabrics of Indian nations would be enormous, that it would surely have an effect on the efficiency, honesty, and the moral of the public sector. Thank you very much.